good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. I am Shenell Felix, and this morning, as we continue our conversations, we're talking about crime and the economy. Now, crime has been a buzzing topic in Tobago for the last 2 to 3 months. Every week, we have been, harping on this crime situation as we've seen an upsurge in crime here on the island of Tobago. But there is a connection between the performance of the economy and crime. But in what way can we look at that? This morning, we're having that conversation with financial analyst David Walker. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning to you. Happy to be back with you again and a most interesting topic. Let me start by confessing that I am not a criminologist. I am not an expert in the area of crime and how it's dealt with, but I do have a good insight into the kinds of things we should be doing if we want to put the impact of crime on the economy into focus and how we should go about dealing with the inevitably, sad as it is, of escalating crime.
Right. And many theorists have theorized that there is a correlation between, a poor economic circumstances like unemployment and other issues and crime. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I think most people, while we would, I suspect, all disagree with persons choosing a life of crime, choosing to engage in a criminal activity, be it robbing an individual or a shop or whatever, we do recognize, most of us, that there are things that drive people to make decisions that they might not otherwise have made. And principal amongst those would be simple things like putting food on the table. If you are unable, and I would like people to try to put themselves into this situation, if you are unable on a morning to provide a plate of food to your young children, to your family, are you more or less likely to be persuaded to do something that most people would consider to be wrong and in fact to be criminal? It is almost common sense, you might say, that that person would be more inclined. That person might start with the same moral view as everybody else. But given the need, the dire need to deal with the situation that confronts them on a daily basis, then they are more likely to fall into those kinds of habits. And one of the things that a lot of the criminologists say is that if we could avoid persons getting onto that first rung of the ladder of criminal activity, we go a long way towards dealing with the crime situation. Then, of course, there are the people for whom crime is almost a way of life. They have come to accept this. And when I say that, I'm very clear in my mind that I am not referring only to the folks who pick up a gun or a cutlass or whatever and go and rob people. I am also referring to the people in authority who pick up a pen or a computer and use that to rob us and to rob the state. To my mind, I feel even more angry to those people because they do that in order to be able to buy a new car. The folks who do it in order to put food on the table are the ones that we look at and criticize day in and day out, and they deserve their criticism. But I am not satisfied that we pay enough attention to those at the top, the customs officers who allow guns to come in, for example, and so on. Why do we not hear as much condemnation of them? And the reality is, if you take one of those out of the system, it has more impact than taking 50 young people who take up a weapon that was brought in by those people. So I want to see more effort in that direction. And that's just a simple risk analysis that we can all do. We can achieve more if we start to aim at the top. We need to address the situation from the top and then work the way down. That is not to say
Right.
we should
And
ignore.
then the United Nations has claimed that, that there's a tendency for crimes such as robbery and homicides to be increased in periods of economic downturn. But can we truly say that what we are seeing in Tobago right now is as a result of any economic downturn? And then there are certain social programs and trainings and opportunities that are out there. So even from the top, what can be done to ensure these young persons that there are other avenues to be taken outside of committing crime?
There is an awful lot of money spent by the government presently, both in Trinidad and Tobago, on programs that are targeted in that direction. I have to conclude, and I suspect most people have concluded as well, that they are grossly ineffective. I feel we need to go back to the drawing board. Let us establish what the budget is that we have to spend on these types of activities. Let us establish what the outcome ought to be, rather than just the knee jerk kind of programs we have now, which have no, in my view, no clear direction, no clear targets, and certainly aren't evaluated on a year-on-year basis to see whether we have met the objectives that we set out when we decided to spend this money on these particular activities.
Right. And there has always been the argument of education and how education feeds into that overall crime rate. But we see that even in the last budget presentation by this administration, they are focusing predominantly on human capital development. Can you see that in the long term possibly helping to be a deterrent to crime or to, decrease the levels of criminality that we could see on the island of Tobago?
I certainly believe that a more productive education sector can go a long way towards reducing crime. I am not convinced that we have a clear plan in mind. I'm deeply concerned that in a lot of areas, crime being one, education being another, even sport falling into that category, that we plan in the very short term. We look at what we're going to do this year and if we're lucky next year. When we're talking, let me give a concrete example. We have a new football regime in place now, and they are talking about qualifying for 2026 World Cup. I believe that kind of short-term thinking is doomed to fail. We need to put plans in place that would take youngsters virtually at the earliest possible stage and start working with them, both in sport and as we're discussing now, with the criminal situation, with educating them properly and so on. We have to start planning for 5 to 10 years ahead. I know we did it in the past. We had what was called at the time the 2020 vision and so on. The principle was exactly what I would recommend, and we need to get back to that, but to implement it properly, to monitor it, and to report on it to the citizens of the country.
All right, excellent. And we're going to take a quick break right here and we're going to come back right after this. See you soon.
It's a brand new morning, rise up.
Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. This morning we continue our conversation on the economy and how economic factors may be influencing crime on the island. Mr. Walker, welcome back to our discussion.
Thank you.
Right. Persons are making the argument or have been making the argument that the fact that many contractors have not been paid and have a long list of outstanding debts from the THA has contributed to the increase in crime on the island of Tobago. Do you think it's safe to make an assessment like that?
I suppose I could break that down into two sections. Firstly, Although we haven't been given information directly, I think it's widely accepted that the THA has failed to pay on time to an awful lot of contractors. Uh, Full disclosure here, THA owes me personally money that's been granted by the court, and even that hasn't been paid. So that I can understand and certainly believe that there are a lot of contractors and their employees who are suffering financially as a result of that. And that is easily a subject for a whole discussion by itself as to why the THA has found itself in this situation and what they need to do to get out of it. And frankly, I'm not seeing them doing the things that are necessary to get out of that situation. So I expect it to continue for the foreseeable future. Once we realize that that is the current state of affairs with the THA's finances, and given what we said earlier about people turning to criminal activities once they find themselves in their dire financial straits, then it is not surprising that that is a major contributory factor to the level of crime that we're seeing. But we know that also the level of crime that we're seeing, and it applies to Trinidad as well, is what appears to most of us to be inadequate controls to stop the crime from happening and from facilitating the crime. And we know what the big ones are. For example, the freedom to board the ferries with a vehicle with virtually no inspection. I travel on the ferry regularly. I love the ferry more than the plane. And I am always amazed that I simply have to open my trunk. Somebody looks at what's in the trunk without opening anything and then sends me onto the boat. It is wide open for for the ability to take the tools of the trade of the criminals across the seas. So there are a few issues that need to be addressed.
Right. And so when it comes to that argument of contractors not being paid, in terms of there being a correlation, it's difficult to assess whether or not there is a direct correlation with that.
Well, I am of the view that there is a correlation because it feeds into what we discussed earlier, and I think what most people agree on, and that is when people are put in difficult financial circumstances and they feel they have no choice in order to meet their basic needs, the temptation is so much greater that inevitably some will succumb to the temptation. So, yes, I do believe that there is a correlation and responsibility has to be placed in the right quarters for that.
All right, excellent. And we saw recently that there has been a proposal for an adjustment on the coat of arms. The Prime Minister indicated during that PNM special convention over the weekend that there are plans afoot to replace the Columbus's ships with the steel pan. Tell us about what do you think about this on a whole, and what type of economic impact you think this can possibly have, if any.
I don't see any significant economic impact, as if to say perhaps more people coming to the island, more people being aware of the islands than before. At a personal level, I certainly am in favor of the steel band being recognized as a national instrument in as many ways as possible. As a financial analyst, one of the first things I would want to know is what is going to be the cost and what is going to be the impact going going down the years, because this is not an overnight thing, and there will be a significant cost to it. And it feeds into the way we go about making decisions at government level that leaves me very unhappy. It is that almost every decision is presented as a binary choice. You either agree with it or you don't agree with it. We, the people, aren't given the opportunity to look at all the nuances, the good, the bad. Let us discuss it. How much is this going to cost? What are the impacts on this? How many things will have to change as a consequence? Is it just the coat of arms, or is it on other things? Is it going to be all our currency? What else? I feel that we should be given that information if those in authority want us to be supportive of it. And I say this in several other contexts, and a lot of people will know that I have criticized some of the big capital spending decisions on the same basis. Give us the facts, let us decide. Even if we disagree, let us understand what is going on so that, as we had with the Sandals, now we're having with the Marriott and so on, give us the facts. So give us the facts with the change to the coat of arms and all the impacts it will have so that we will understand. And also importantly, when the impacts do occur, we aren't taken by surprise and people don't get upset and say, but you could have told us. So a bit more information, please.
All right, excellent. And so when it comes to that coat of arms change, you said you do support, the move towards making that the national instrument and everything that comes with that. But what other type of impact can you see coming from that, whether it be from an educational standpoint or just from an international perspective?
This is where we need more information. Has it been thought through at government level that we also need perhaps an awareness campaign? So should we be talking about this at school level, from primary school all the way through, so that everybody understands what is being done, understands the motive behind it, and what we hope to achieve, so that they could participate. We can all participate rather than just looking on and hoping that it all goes well, because we don't know how we could contribute to making this better. In principle, I am in support of it, but I wish I knew more. I wish I knew how I personally could contribute and how other people who want to get on board could get on board to make it a success.
Right. And you're recommending a lot more public consultation on the matter and on other similar matters. Have you been paying
Absolutely.
attention? Right. Have you been
Yeah,
paying
I was going to say
attention to?
absolutely, but in a positive way. Tell us what you want. Tell us what you, as a decision maker, need from us to help to make it a success. Don't just tell us this is what it is. You got to accept it. That you probably have something that most people would be willing to sign up for if only we could be told a bit more about what it is.
Okay. And we're shifting gears a bit to what's happening on the financial and economic front here at the THA level, specifically as it relates to crime. Now, we've heard the announcement by the Chief Secretary a couple weeks ago that there are plans in the making to have that Tobago police service. Do you think at this time, with everything that's happened economically, that Tobago has what it takes to focus those limited resources on investing in security for the island by means of that Tobago police?
I certainly would like to see the Tobago Police Service having an enhanced role in addressing the uptick in crime on the island. My biggest concern, as I alluded to earlier, is the ability for guns to flow from Trinidad to Tobago. Now, I don't have access to the information that the police have, so I don't know whether guns are arriving directly into Tobago, maybe by fishing boats or whatever, or whether the weapons are coming from Trinidad on the ferry or by other means. They will have that information, so they will know what is best. And that is where I feel it is very, very important, critical even, that anything that we do in Tobago is coordinated with Trinidad. Because my personal view and the view of most people I speak to is that a lot of it is originating from Trinidad, sometimes via Tobagonians or sometimes via Trinidadians. But if we don't address the linkages between Trinidad and Tobago from a crime standpoint, I think we're doomed to fail. I don't think it's something that we can solve on our own or even control on our own.
But when crime being one of those areas that fall under national security and is the responsibility of the central government, is now having to, be carried, the financial burden for that is being carried by the THA, isn't that taking away from other development investments that can be done by the THA to help really, push development on the island of Tobago?
Well, this is one aspect of our much bigger problem that I would like to discuss in more detail at some time in the future, which is the allocation of resources and the decisions that are being made as to whether we spend on A, B, or C, and what the impacts are. What is the value that we derive from each of those investments? So I would like to see a situation where even where we invest in crime fighting, whichever methodology we choose, that we get some metrics. What's this going to cost? What is going to be deprived of money as a result? What are the returns we expect from investment? Nationally, we have this tendency to value investments by ribbon cutting and seeing a building. We need to move on at a national level, and I would love it if Tobago would take a lead. We don't always have to follow Trinidad. Take a lead. Whenever we come forward with capital investment, in this case with crime fighting, we analyze it, we inform the population as to what it is going to achieve, and we can see that there is going to be a commensurate benefit to us in terms of reduced crime if we spend this amount of money in this direction as opposed to in this other direction. And that's where your criminologists and your specialists come in. They can analyze and give you the projections as to what are the likely benefits of different courses of action and the cost of those courses of action. So I would like to see more of that rather than just bland announcements that don't give us the how or what and the when.
Right. Well, I think that's really important when the whole discussion about crime and, just economic development happens. But we're seeing that Tobago has moved into what we can deem somewhat a state of desperation when it comes to fighting and targeting crime and criminality on the island. Just a few weeks ago, we heard the Chief Secretary making a suggestion that investments be made in, maybe leasing those pirogues to assist the Coast Guard with that fight on the water because Tobago has such limited resources. When it comes to being able to provide those resources that are needed for Tobago to fight crime, this is the responsibility of national security. But when we're not seeing the type of investment and strategic placements that are needed to fight crime, what is the THA really left to do when it comes to allocating resources within the remit of its power to fight crime?
I have no objection whatsoever. In fact, I applaud efforts on our part in Tobago to augment what is done by central government. I am not convinced that we know the sources of our rapid increase in criminality over the last couple of years. That for me is the foundation of anything that we do. So if somebody said to me now, okay, let's go and spend $5 million on pirogues to help the Coast Guard, are we convinced that that is the correct way to go and that it will achieve the desired results? I am seeing a whole layer of the solution being ignored. As I say, I applaud the Chief Secretary for being prepared to step forward and do what he thinks is necessary. But I will repeat ad infinitum. We do not yet know what is necessary and what will work. We're taking pot shots. We just saying, okay, let's fire a shot here, let's fire a shot there. That is not the answer. We need more analysis. We need the expertise. I am not an expert in criminology, except insofar as I have done some consulting work for police services, but nothing nearly deep enough for me to feel that I have real expertise in that area. I understand that in Trinidad and Tobago, we do have expertise. We need to bring that expertise to the front. That's where we need first to spend money. And it's interesting that one of the senior people at the assembly is, in fact, an expert in the field. I'm speaking here about Mr. Anselm Richards, who is a, I forget the term, but essentially it's an economist who specializes in criminology. Those are the people that we need, and we don't just need them there. We need to give them the power and the authority to do the work and to come up with the recommendations. They won't make the decisions, but the decision makers must have the output of their efforts. I am frankly concerned that we're just spending money and thinking that if we spend enough, we will somehow solve the problem. I simply do not see it that way.
Right. And going back to a discussion that we had earlier in regards to the correlation between contractors not being paid on time and that, having a connection to increased crime on the island, do you think that it is now, part of the responsibility of the central government to ensure that these payments are given to the THA, or that the type of money that is being requested is given to sufficiently cover the debt that the THA is in, as well as some of the development plans of this administration?
The THA, first of all, has to account for the money that it's got and how it spent it. And the commitments that I was concerned about from day one, given the situation where the regime started off saying that they simply did not have enough money to do the basic things, and most particularly capital expenditure, the decision to undertake significant capital expenditure in those circumstances with no new source of income on the horizon, and simply hoping that we would find it from Trinidad or from, well, sorry, I don't like to say Trinidad, from central government and from international borrowing agencies, to me was foolhardy. It was almost guaranteed to put us into the position that we're in now. So we have to find novel ways in order to get out of the situation. And one novel way that we must absolutely avoid is to dig deeper, which is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing talk about raising loans on markets, both national and international, in order to cover, first of all, the debts that have already been incurred and new debts for new projects that are supposedly in the pipeline. We need radical solutions, I'm afraid I have to say. We have to look at the structure of the Tobago economy. We have to look seriously at the number of people employed either directly or indirectly by the THA. Then we have to figure out how a larger proportion of the population can be employed outside of that sector. And that's where we need to start a discussion about the diversification effort and the further promotion of tourism and so on, so that they could take up a significant number of the jobs, which effectively we are being asked to support from the public purse, when that should not be the case. We should not have 60 to 70% of the working population employed directly or indirectly by the state. A move to reduce that by, say, 20% would free a lot of resource for us to do the other things that we keep on saying that we need to do. So bottom line for me, we need to stop looking outside. We need to look at ourselves. We need to look at what we can do with the resources that we have and the opportunities that Tobago provides us in order to generate more income, so that we don't find ourselves in this perpetual situation where we're complaining that we don't have enough money from central government.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Walker. You're always here to give insights, and we are always here to welcome you. Again, thank you so much for sticking with us this morning. Thank you so much for your likes, your shares, and your comments, and for continuing to engage in this discussion in relation to crime. This is where we have to end off this morning. Unfortunately, our time here has expired. Now, you can follow me on social media, any social media platform, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, at Shenell Felix, as you follow my journey and everything that's happening behind the scenes. Again, thank you so much for being a part of the discussion here on Tobago Updates, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you and have a great day.